Okay, welcome. After the astonishing Black Lives Matter movement has swept across the Western world, I'm delighted to invite Ben Cobley to have a chat about the movement and its implications, and also following on from a wonderful and very well received piece on SDP Talk that Ben wrote, and then a subsequent piece I wrote about civilized toleration. So welcome, Ben.
Oh, well, yeah, nice to be here. I'm very impressed with your mounting hair and the lack of haircut.
That's what happens in a lockdown.
Beautiful.
I haven't been to the barbers for 3 months. Yeah, that's it. And
You're starting to look sort of 70s rock, or maybe 80s at the moment. I'm not
there
sure.
you go. There you go.
Right.
Well, I might just run with it and let it go.
I think so. Just let it go. Let it hang out.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. So let's kick off. So I'm gonna kick off by mentioning the first line of your piece. I mean, the piece is incredible, and I think we have something like 50 or 60,000 reads on there, and it's
I saw something. It was 25 or so thousand, but certainly it's been getting a lot of readership even since then.
It's astonishing, and the comments as well. Well over 200 comments. So it had an impact, and it was obviously because you wrote the book, The Tribe, which is I guess a precursor to a lot of this stuff. You were the ideal person to write that piece. So I'm glad you wrote it, and it's certainly done a lot for public debate, which is sadly lacking. So just to get into it, the first line you say that BLM is a masterpiece of political marketing. What do you mean by that? How does that work?
Well, I mean, it's I mean, in marketing terms, in political campaigning terms, it's a slogan which serves a fantastic purpose. Black Lives Matter. I mean, who is not a racist could disagree with that?
All morally competent people agree with that.
Exactly. It's actually banal as a strict statement for anyone who is not a racist. It doesn't need to be said, but it's an assertion out there pushing itself out in front of us, saying you've got to respond to this. And if you make any sort of resistance, then you're having fingers pointed at you, and you're being fingered as a possible racist. So it's a very powerful slogan in that way, in that it has an automatic sort of block on us from resisting. And since the slogan is attached to a campaign, or actually a sort of a series of different campaigns which are interlinked, it's quite a viral thing. Anyone can pick up on Black Lives Matter and run with it and be part of the whole thing. But that block on it makes it very difficult to oppose any of this. And then when you see what these people are advocating, i.e. The abolition of the police, or sometimes they say defunding of the police, the dismantling of the Western family, the abolition of various other institutions which are seen to be, I don't know, racially compromising and structurally racist or something like that. It's all very vague, nebulous, and without limits what they're potentially in favour of. And yet this slogan means it's very difficult to oppose any of it without seeming to be against the idea that Black Lives Matter.
Yeah,
and the campaigners have exploited this for all it's worth.
It's been a curious thing, because it has literally closed down any debate. I mean, it's the normal sort of organs that you'd expect to scrutinise a political movement in a normal way, in a sort of on a par way, have stopped functioning. I mean, things like, okay, you might not expect the BBC to be brilliant nowadays, and it isn't. It's really quite politically biased, and it filters a lot of stuff. But actually, they've found themselves completely unable to ask basic questions which they would ask of anyone else.
Definitely. Yes, and it's so, you can see the power operating there. And I mean, I turned the TV on the other day, which I don't very often. I barely watch TV at all, including
Very
BBC.
wise. Yeah.
And but the football was on, so I turned it on for the football, And the first thing I get at the beginning of the Norwich Man United match is a 1-minute lecture about how Black Lives Matter is such a good thing, with no talk from the commentators about why it's a good thing, or any sort of debate. It's just an accepted groupthink thing that this is all great and it's magnificent, and you're just left going, well, this is a really strong, ideological, racially charged political campaign, which is not just getting a free pass when its issues come up on the news or anything. It's actually being promoted relentlessly on non-political programs, on the radio and on the TV.
That's true, and yeah, so
Guy's doing it as well.
There's no scrutiny. I mean, it's everywhere. That's true, but it's funny that where does that lead? What it leads to is corporate all through the institutions, corporations, the BBC, or the media, football clubs, the lot, accepting a political program that they haven't scrutinized. And I think another part of your piece was making the basic point that actually a lot of the people that are supporting BLM with capital letters, i.e. the movement itself, obviously haven't scrutinized it. I mean, the footballers, it is actually comical to think that they could subscribe to this, because if they did, the Lamborghinis would have to go back, surely.
Well, that's in a case if BLM took over the government. I mean, practically what's going on with Black Lives Matter is they're making a lot of noise and campaigning and pressurizing existing institutions. So like the BBC had an announcement the other day that they were putting £100 million into diversity and inclusion programming. And if you read the blurb, the press release stuff, the PR for it, it was basically just rehashing the BLM PR accounts themselves. Tony Hall, the departing Director General, he was just reciting basically what was on I assume a crib sheet from some of the campaigners, and reading out how, since George Floyd's murder, we've all been reflecting on these issues and racial, and we just decided to put £100 million into this programming. That was the explanation. And obviously, I mean, this would have been in the works for a while, but I can detect there's what's going on is there's in institutions and in say in the football world, there are people like the ex-footballers, the footballers themselves, but also within institutions, people within these institutions are acting like activists. They're obviously receiving the talking points through social media or through other contacts or something, and they're reciting those lines to their bosses, putting them under pressure. It comes from all sorts of different angles. If you look at the BBC, June Sarpong has been appointed as, I think, Director of Creative Diversity.
Right.
And the way she talks is like an internal campaigner within the BBC, putting pressure on them and making not so veiled threats that if they don't do what she wants, she's going to start denouncing the corporation as racist.
But for something to be as comprehensive as this is the bizarre thing. I mean, I think there is a complete misalignment with BLM's program and the general population. We know that. We know that. And Rod Little's mentioned recently that the polling organisations are actually scared to do polling on this because the results might know what they want. But for it to be as comprehensive, there has to be a combination, doesn't there, of genuine desire for some people for their own reasons to get on board with this stuff, and then on the other side, fear. Because
definitely. I was sorry, I would break you off because I was actually waffling just a minute ago, and I didn't get to my point, which is that it's and this is the way diversity, the system of diversity, as I spoke about it in my book, works, is that it's benefiting what I call the representatives of the favoured groups. People are standing up, the activist types. So in this case, it's the footballers and the commentators. They're looking to get more opportunities for themselves. And it's understandable. They want to. one of their campaigns, they want more black managers. Now, they've used the example that Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard have got big jobs, while Ashley Cole and Sol Campbell haven't. So that's a sample size of 2, which they're using to make, a huge fuss about how, there need to be, and this puts a lot of pressure on their institutions, and it will achieve some things, or they'll get a few extra benefits.
Well, I can understand the motivations for activists to try and, effectively to get flows of money and resources to support them and embed them. I can understand that. But and I can also understand someone in an organisation just shutting up or a footballer taking the knee that doesn't really believe in it. I can understand that because they have mortgages and they have families to support. I can understand that. But there was another thing which came out of, I was reading Ed West's book the other day, and he made a point about virtue, which I thought was just fascinating. So how about this? Virtue is a status thing. It's a status hierarchy thing. And what a lot of middle class people really, really want is to be high up on that status hierarchy. And what is the status hierarchy now? It's virtue. It's I'm so nice.
Well, it's the appearance of virtue.
Exactly.
It's a socialized virtue, and it's a superficial. I mean, this is how the Black Lives Matter thing has kind of captured all these institutions, because none of them are actually looking at anything that it's doing and that it advocates. They're just going on the really superficial level, the sort of the basic press releases that are being put out, and they're all kind of joining in as a crowd. So it's a kind of a very socialized form of, appearance of virtue rather than virtue as a behavior.
Yeah, but it's also, there's a link to, because what's puzzled people recently has been how woke capitalism has become. The FT. I mean, the FT is a bit of a joke newspaper if you want financial news now, but it has this supplement called How to Spend It, which is a grotesque. I mean, capitalism is useful and it's important, and we all need jobs, but that is an absolute grotesque magazine full of just base materialism. But the weird thing is, this is the strange thing, the FT is as woke on this stuff as any organ that you'd find. Yes. It's curious, and it's almost as if they say, well, I tell you what, I'll give you a buy on all this stuff as long as you don't go after my money. It's strange.
Yes. No, there's certainly that element to it. Yeah.
It's very odd. And so the march of the institutions, I must say, I don't think I would have. I'll get to a question in a second. I don't think I would have understood what's happening now as well without having read your book, because it is all about this. Once you've set up this system of oppressor and victim, everything is seen through there. The whole lot.
But of course, it's not just the theory. The theory is important largely because it's so simple. We can all understand identity politics, can't we? This group good, the other group not so good. Everyone can get that. It can be a working system of politics that anyone in the world can understand and plug into. And I think virtually everyone in our society now, we know what the rules of diversity are, more or less. There are some questions about trans and
well, we're getting onto them. There's SDP
and all that.
Public very soon. Yeah.
But I think what is really important is not so much the theory; it's the way that it's now embedded itself in our society, not just in our way of thinking, but in the rules that institutions have implemented. And this has largely gone in through the HR, the human resources functions, through positive discrimination, and of course they're also handling behavioural matters within companies and all the rest. So, through that HR function, you're getting a kind of a system of social control taking over. And some of the stuff I'm seeing, from multinationals is incredible about, the sort of behavioural thought control which is going on within them.
But here's the thing: you see an organisation which is ostensibly calls itself anti-racist, against racism, is promoting a whole set of policies on racial favoritism right the way through. And all governments and corporations are meant to go along with this. And actually,
and they are going along with it.
And so that's just a clear contradiction, and it's likely to make things worse. That's my basic. I mean, I think the real tragedy of all this stuff, and it's a massive tragedy, is that the impact of importing this American hyper-racialism on UK race relations will just be negative. I just can't see it bringing anything but setting us for years.
I mean, I completely agree. I think it's an absolute disaster. It makes me angry, upset sometimes, because it's so unnecessary, and there are so many great things about this country. And I mean, there are a lot of problems with multiculturalism and diversity, but a lot of that story has been a very positive one for our country, and has benefited us, and deserves to be celebrated. And yet we've got this terrible polarization, like you say, which is, I don't know about you, but I've never felt so white in my life. I'm conscious of it, and I'm conscious that I'm being told all the time that it's a negative thing. And your natural reaction to that is to go, well, you can either submit to it or you can go, no, and unless you're quite strong, you're going to go, well, why not just say that being white is positive, being white is great?
Yeah, but that's
you've got racial thinking, conventional racism right there.
It's true. I think it's absolutely true that it wouldn't. I mean, certainly in places like the Northeast, which is, it's all quite recently, it's been pretty monocultural, I guess. It wouldn't have occurred. Their ethnicity wouldn't have occurred to them. I mean, people didn't wake up in the morning and saying, being white's important to me or anything like that. The real tragedy, I think, Ben, of this is that the long-term consequences of racializing a racial majority could also be catastrophic. And I think a lot of us, when Trump got in, Trump is an ignoramus. The strange thing about that election was, how could it happen? How could it happen? I think I understood some of the causes, and I think some of the causes of why Trump got in need to be addressed. I mean, he didn't come from nothing. He, I think for an
imbecile to be elected. Something pretty amazing must be going on.
Yeah, something. Well, 30 years of liberal policy caused Trump. I mean, that's the bizarre thing. I mean, who do they think was in control? But just get back to this point. What are the consequences? I mean, was Trump's election, for years and years and years before, the Democrats took for granted that they had the Latino vote or the black vote. It was considered their vote. And you saw Biden say that the other day, effectively, how could you vote Republican if you're black? And if they viewed that way, if they viewed their voters in that way, as a sort of block vote, what is stopping a racial majority saying, well, I'm going to start voting for the Republicans because I'm white? Which is not what you want. I mean, these things are terrible consequences. And it's taken me a little bit of time to absorb the Trump election win and understand why. But I think to some extent it was him mobilizing, because he's not the unifying force at all, mobilizing racial majority concerns or fears, and then getting people to vote on it. Where's that going to end? That's terrifying.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Makes me scared.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, myself, I sort of flip between going, it can't possibly get any worse. Things will right themselves. It will all be okay. And then you see just some of the stuff that's going on, and it's going on every day. Just log into Twitter in the morning and just check out what's going on. And it's ramping up, and there's no sign of it going anywhere. And actually, writing my book, it did make me pretty pessimistic, because I was, for example, writing about the Labour Party and how it's worked in positive discrimination into its rule book to a huge extent, to the extent that even if Keir Starmer goes, oh right, we don't want to be doing all this identity politics anymore. You can't rewrite the whole rule book, which is structuring your party and how it's organised and who's doing what, according to race and gender and sexuality and all the rest of it. The whole party is organised on that basis. And the Labour's way of doing it, I noticed when I was writing it as well, was, basically it was its way, and the, ways from America were spreading across the whole of our institutional society. The is a classic example.
Well, I think they are part of the problem.
They're practicing progressive identity politics in their organisation, and I think we can see, what we see on our screens if we watch anymore, and on the radio is largely a consequence of it's just the air that they breathe now in the BBC is positive discrimination.
Yeah, and it's strange. I mean, I don't think I think the tragic events in Minneapolis that were the spark for this. A lot of people will be thinking, where did this come from? Did it just happen because of the lockdown or social media or whatever? But actually, I think that on your book's thesis, the sort of groundwork, the work to prime all this stuff has been going on a long time. Otherwise it just couldn't have switched on like a light. Yeah?
Definitely. I think I talk in the book at one stage about activating the system. So a certain event, for example, when Farage, you could say, bear with me, with the attack in Glasgow that happened the other day in the asylum seekers hotel, and it's a very difficult subject for the liberal left, for progressives, and for the media, therefore, to deal with. If it's going on in the asylum seeker hotel. But if Farage throws his weight in and starts having a go at immigration and asylum and open borders and all the rest of it, that activates, in the way I think of it, the system. It makes people comfortable. It gives them an opening to go, oh, here's the problem. He's the person we need to target, and we have the language to address that.
I thought I never comment on these attacks because I think you need to find out what's happened before you do, and it always makes me cringe when people jump in. But apart from it being just unedifying anyway, but I thought on the Reading thing, it appears to be the case. I mean, certainly Douglas Murray reported it, that you saw the liberal system of diversity work actually in the reporting of that, because I think the 3 victims were gay men. I don't think Pink News or Gay News covered it. They on the front page of those publications that day, they were covering, they were hammering J.K. Rowling for saying that biological sex is real. So that was a perfect illustration of the system, because these two groups were inside, so you can't possibly criticize.
It's a working system of politics.
Yeah.
For the system to work, for it to the integrity to be maintained as a powerful political, if you like, entity of togetherness. You can't have different favoured groups having a go at each other. Sorry, there's a phone ringing.
Easy, don't worry.
Right.
You may see a whippet wander around in this room, so we'll see how we.
You're up north, aren't you? So,
yeah, I'm up north. Yeah.
Now, what was I talking about? I was waffling about something.
We were talking about how the system works, how the loyalty.
Groups.
The
if gay organisations, LGBT organisations, start questioning high-scale immigration or Islam, that creates a tension within the system.
They break the rules. Yeah, they break
within left-leaning groups which align to the left. So it can harm both of them if they do that. So you see, for example, with Islamist groups, who are privately and even in their own activities are often blatantly homophobic.
Yeah.
But in public, in the English language diaspora, in our public sphere, they won't ever say anything like that. Or they won't. They often just don't participate in the public sphere, except to attack how to say that they're being victimised by society and the rest of it. So it keeps everything within bounds,
Yeah, but it closes down debate, and it's a strange thing. But you only really, it takes a little bit of work actually, partly that you've done to unpick it and understand what's happening. Otherwise, I think a lot of people are wondering, how is that the case, or how does that work?
It's really difficult to deal with in a way because it's so straightforward.
Yes. Yes, it's just people inside a tent that have loyalty.
In the book, just describing what was going on, what I just found really difficult, just because there's so much noise around it, And just to describe what they're actually doing is, I think, the first step to any sort of way out of the mess that we're in.
Well, on that, we should move on to now, because your piece had a much bigger impact than mine. And it's a timely piece, but I wrote a piece.
Let's promote your one.
Just after.
It's worth it, yeah.
And what I tried to sort of outline there was just an idea, which is it's not an SDP idea, but it is an SDP idea. It's not an original one, of civilized toleration, which is just an idea that a sort of precondition for a society that's diverse to get on is that we allow some differences to go. I mean, any state, any government has to look at disparities of various kinds, and some need dealing with. They really do need dealing with. But others, one or two, are quite subtle, and the causes for the disparity are deep within each culture. And I think it was really a call to try and argue that it is a precondition. If we don't understand that all diverse societies have a little bit of diversity in outcomes, where are we? I mean, are we going to run a rule over everything? And if you look at the data, if you go to the ONS or British Social Attitudes Surveys or anything, you will honestly, once you start, you will find disparities literally all over the place.
Well, of course, it's
I
the
think in a free society, there's got to be just some tolerance of that, and a recognition that actually be careful where you start. I mean, that's what I would say.
Well, I could go back and talk about the system again, and how their currency is grievance. So it doesn't matter what the facts are; they will find some sort of way. And you see this with the campaign groups; they're institutionally dishonest about the way they handle statistics.
Very, very dishonest. Yeah, I mean, and many of the claims just don't stack up, and are not.
And again, moaning about the media, and sorry to be doing that, but it's worth doing. The media routinely doesn't examine any of it.
No,
doesn't question any of the claims. Doesn't roll back on it. Doesn't in their comment pieces they'll generally just go along with it. And so the whole thing just keeps rolling on. But going back to your point, I mean, this idea of civilized toleration, and more generally, I think it's so important that, as well as moaning and whinging quite rightly about a lot of this stuff and being afraid and sometimes angry about it, we also need to offer hope. And especially as a political party, it's really important to offer a way that we can come together, as a people, but also as a political party, what our values are, what we care about and how we bring together.
Setting down the values is really important, and we have had a great reaction to it. And I mean, I think the curious thing is that this is the sad thing about a lot of the radicalization. It won't even achieve what they're saying they want. I mean, I actually don't think they really want what they say they want. They just want agitation. And the curious thing about our society is actually, it's not curious, it's just a good aspect of it, is that absent agitators, people get on. That's the truth. I mean, that's just true. If you leave people and don't agitate, people have the capacity to get on. There is such a thing as progress on these things, and all the data says that. I mean, it's John McWhirter and Coleman Hughes are literally, tearing their hair out in the States. The States has never been less racist than it is now. Racism exists, but it's never been less racist. But the events of the last couple of months, that's put that back. I mean, it's terrifying, really. So I think, absent of agitation, people do have the capacity to get on and will get on and marry and fall in love and all the rest of it, and integrate. I think that's very positive. All you can do is assert it. Actually, all you can do is assert what your values are, as sort of non-prejudiced, colorblind. I mean, a colorblind attitude, I think, is just a decent attitude. Actually, it's an attitude that is intellectually quite sound, and it's one that we support. I think it's not to say that government shouldn't look at disparities, but I think if you're going to have a look at discrimination or positive government action, looking at socioeconomic ones, it is a better basis than actually looking at it purely on racial favoritism and less divisive.
Yeah, no, I generally agree. I mean, it's, for me, that's just the basics. And I think with the systems of, of positive discrimination, which, like I say, are are everywhere in our society almost now, and it's a habitual standpoint for anyone going into the public sphere to favour non-white people, to favour refugees, migrants, and women, and gay people, and transgender has come into that as well as a big complication, which has caused all sorts of trouble. I call it a sort of a breakdown case in the system, where different favoured groups actually do clash. So you get women and transgender. But going back to the positive of things we can do, I think another basic thing is trying to draw back people back, and you won't do this with the activists, but try and draw normal people back in the mainstream media, public sphere, back to a distinction between behavioural discrimination and then ideological idea of it, systemic racism, patriarchy, all this Islamophobia is almost talked about, Islamophobic society and that type of thing, and that basically extends the idea of discrimination to the whole of society. So it loses any factual basis and example of someone actually being discriminatory. So it can describe anything you like. And you see this with the activists. They assume that to begin with, and then they go off and they look for sort of examples they can attack their opponents for.
If you believe that you want
completely dishonest in the way that intellectually dishonest. Yeah.
But if your aim is to bring people together, which is what our aim is to do, social reconciliation is a big part of what we're trying to do. If that's your aim, you can't do it if you constantly hammer and emphasize the differences. If you want to focus just on differences, you'll get division.
Definitely, and we see again the hypocrisy when it suits them. Progressives, liberal left, race activists, all the rest of it. They will talk about how we all need to come together, and we have more in common than we have apart. When it's coming together over their activity, that's fine.
And on their terms.
When it doesn't involve them, then it's hate and it's systemic racism and it's discrimination and all the rest of it.
Well, I think another thing that I think has come up is that you ask what we should do, and I think the keep on trucking and keep on saying what we're saying is what we do. I think the challenge for us, the challenge really always is, how do you actually confront some of these ideas without getting sort of sucked into a culture war in inverted commas, and being part of the problem? And I think it's something that I wrestle with a little bit.
I do too.
It's a lot of this stuff is particularly on social media. We're polite. We've got to get on, but I think not. Failing to challenge it is just a mistake. I think, and I think
briefly, I'd say it's good to challenge power.
Yeah.
So when people in power are making huge mistakes as they are, I think it's completely worthwhile taking one side, and it appears to be taking a culture war side. Yeah. But then, obviously, say when you're on Twitter and someone says something blatantly racist, I tend to sort of start using rude language towards them.
I know, I've seen that, and that's good. That's fine. That's good.
But idiots and that type of thing.
No, that's fine. But I just think, another thing that you can do, and it's a nicer way of dealing with it actually, is just recommend who should people be reading. I would say read Shelby Steele, have a look at Coleman Hughes, John McWhirter, Glenn Lowry, because a lot of this stuff's come from the States. Have a look at the best writers in the States dealing with it, and a lot of them are very courageous and well worth reading. So I would check those people out. Have a look at what Eric Kaufman's saying. There are lots of people that should, and I think if we stick together as a community of reason, I think just keep on going and see how we are up against it, as you said in the piece. But doing nothing and throwing in the towel is not a solution. It's not something we're not going to do that.
Definitely. And I think, I mean, obviously our position, I mean, I don't feel afraid in saying this, it's obviously right. I mean, and a lot of people now with what's going on, with how many people are being sacked or suspended from their jobs, or, you know, just generally denounced for basic behavior in a free society, questioning, criticizing, not being racist, but, you know, being accused of the worst things and suffering the consequences. A lot of people now are starting to twig that actually this is serious. And so, in a sense, things are going our way, but a large part of my pessimism is that they're already the other way, and that's embedded in our society.
But what
it won't be dismantled quickly.
It won't be dismantled quickly, but actually a lone individual against corporations or governments or large institutions is a lone individual, and that's the point. I mean, one of the big takes from your book, you know, before I met you, and I read it, and you say at the end, towards the end, you say, you know, actually to tackle this, you need to build institutions, and actually, basically, that's what the SDP.
And I see the SDP.
It is. Yeah, it's coming together of people that think in a similar way, and instead of doing nothing and being pessimistic, we've convened something and we'll build it. And this institution, anyway, for as long as the people that are in it exist, then it will resist this stuff in a decent way, you know, in the most decent way we can. And I think that the institution is very, very important, actually. So that's a nice take from your book, and it's probably a nice way to close this off. And unless you want to bring anything else up.
No, I think we've waffled on for long enough.
We probably have.
I have anyway. But yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on. And
great. Well, just keep on going, Ben, and thanks very much. Great to chat. And there will be an opportunity when the Star at Belgravia reopens properly. I'll stand you a pint.
Get together and have a nice drink.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Take care.